A big press conference yesterday to announce the fact that there is a big fight coming up in September. It is a mandatory challenge for Anthony Joshua, and apparently it's against the third best heavyweight in the world. Gareth A Davies is here this morning to school us about why it is important that this fight happens and why we shouldn't just automatically be fast forwarding in our heads to the inevitable Anthony Joshua Deontay Wilder super fight. Gareth, good morning to you.
Good morning, Joe. I hope you're ready for getting a bit of this. No, but it's great to be on the show again, guys. We are looking at the number 3 heavyweight in the world, and you're just voicing earlier what I think a lot of fans feel, which is they were hoping that Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua would fight at Wembley in September, October, or November. But I've said it before on the show. The very biggest boxing matches, when it comes down to the negotiations, it's like the old Wild West, fighting for land grab and gold mines, and it does take a long time to play out. I think there are a few curveballs thrown by both sides. I wouldn't believe everything the Americans have said about the money offers and all those kind of things. But yeah, we've got Anthony Joshua against Alexander Povetkin on September the 22nd at Wembley Stadium. And you know what? It'll do 90,000 live in the stadium again, and it'll probably do 1 million on pay-per-view. But what we need to do over the next 11 weeks is probably dissect exactly why Joshua is fighting Alexander Povetkin.
Yeah, well, let's start with that then. Again, just looking at your Twitter feed this morning, people are wondering if Povetkin deserves to be where he is. I mean, sure, he is in the position to be the mandatory challenger at the moment, but he's got his own dubious history when it comes to being banned for drugs, and also people are wondering about whether or not he's actually as good a fighter as his positioning suggests. So maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I completely agree with you, with all the other journalists who feel that way, and all the fans who feel, in a sense, that the stain, the tainting of Povetkin is down to those 2 positive drugs tests. There is a history, of course, of the Russian Federation in several sports being involved in doping. Some of it, of course, exposed in that brilliant film Icarus. In which there are cases where there has been widespread doping amongst Russian athletes. I think there is a caveat for me. There's no question about it as to whether Povetkin deserves that position as a result of this test, whether he should still be serving a drugs ban. But at the moment, outside Deontay Wilder, perhaps Dillian White and perhaps Joseph Parker in rematches with Anthony Joshua, and the returning, of course, Tyson Fury, who will be in Belfast on August the 18th, Windsor Park. There aren't any challengers out there. If there had been great challengers, I don't think Povetkin would have had a look in. He does have very powerful backers who will have, remonstrated to the WBA about this, and he's got himself into a mandatory position. I don't condone any athlete, especially in fight sports, who tests positive for a drugs ban. It's heinous, it's criminal as far as I'm concerned. And I imagine, given how strong the British media is on these kind of things, and the Irish media come to that, I think Povetkin, and we're off to see him at Wembley Stadium today, Jeff, I'll certainly be asking him some very tough questions about why and what he was thinking when these things occurred. I'm glad you're sponsored by Screwfix.
The one thing about the fight game, and I fully agree with the whole thing about it being criminal, because the rules suggest that you're actually out there to try and knock your opponent out, which means to finish the fight by concussing them. It's much easier for you to do that if you've got turbocharged illegally muscles. The opposite side of that is, unfortunately, that these fights then draw even bigger crowds, because he becomes this supervillain that the narrative feeds into, and like we have to talk about the fact that he is a supervillain because he's cheated in the past, and so that actually, unfortunately, adds to the whole, well, I want to see how the supervillain does against Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, exactly, and it does add to the narrative. I think you're right, and it certainly adds to the journalistic narrative that will be built up. And Povetkin's a very quiet, very respectful man. He's not a motor mouth. I think, as we saw with the over-the-top streaming service DAZN launch yesterday in New York with Bellator MMA. Scott Coker announced his welterweight tournament there, and Anthony Joshua there with Povetkin and Eddie Hearn as they announced their big American deal with Perform and DAZN. Of course, Joshua against Povetkin is going to be on this streaming service in America on September the 22nd. Who was in the background? But Big Miller, I'm sure you've seen it, and Joshua turned around, and I can't repeat it on air, but the number of expletives that Anthony Joshua used would probably last him 10 years, judging by how many we've heard from him in the last 7 or 8 years that he's been prominent. Certainly got under his skin, whereas he turned back to Povetkin and they were good as gold together. So it's a difficult one in some ways, because Povetkin's going to be put out there, as you say, similarly to a supervillain, as a drugs cheat, as a tainted champion, rather like Canelo will be. And we'll come on to Canelo Alvarez, I'm sure, because I've been with Gennady Golovkin in Vegas recently. But once someone tests positive, I think it's more serious than you even mentioned. You can be legally killed in a boxing ring. You can be legally killed in a mixed martial arts cage or combat arena. So we're going to have, I'm not sure I've mentioned this on the show before, but at some point, and I hope it never happens, but I think at some point, someone's going to be irreparably damaged, maybe brain damaged, maybe needed to be operated on, possibly, I hope not, could be tragically killed in a ring. And if a boxer tests, or a fighter, an MMA fighter, tests positive, the opponent tests positive for a banned substance afterwards or in the build-up, but that comes out in the aftermath, are we looking at manslaughter then? These are the issues we're dealing with. It's not jumping over hurdles. It's not running 100 meters quicker than another man or woman. It is punching someone, as you say, to render them unconscious, and you can legally die in a combat arena. That's the seriousness of the issue that we're facing when someone tests positive for a banned substance that enhances their weapon, which is themselves, of course.
Yeah, it's really grim. It's really grim. And like my kind of my first full understanding of this was when Andy Lee spoke about fighting in the States against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who in the aftermath of that fight, the testing was not properly conducted. Chavez Jr. comes out as this absolutely massive human being. And, you're thinking, like, you fear for the life of somebody who you know and trust and respect, and who you know is going about things the right way. And from that point forward, I was, like, completely out on, not that you wouldn't have been beforehand, but, like, it actually brings home the point that you're making, that it could lead to
it does. And like it's like you say, you get behind that boxer who you believe is honest in their work then, and who hasn't taken to ulterior or alternative methods to build their weapon of choice, which is their arms, their physique, their legs, their neck, all those things. So yeah, I mean, there won't be anyone that wants Povetkin to win. He'll be a massive hate figure, if you like, but I think he's got 11 weeks. I suspect he'll say he didn't know he took it. Something was tainted in what he took. He's never come out and admitted to being a cheat. But I think it's an opportunity for him to say, look at me, I've been given a second chance here. Because he is a quiet, respectful man. As I said, we saw Joshua and baby Gerald Miller going at it yesterday. Joshua and Povetkin being incredibly respectful to each other. Is it only me and you talking this morning, Jeff?
No, Owen's here as well, yeah.
Gareth, just on that, it's interesting that you finished on that point, because that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about, the Joshua and Miller exchange yesterday, which seemed to be quite an honest sort of explosion from Anthony Joshua. As you say, we don't see him use expletives, much less do we see him ever get angry in those sort of press conference moments. But at the same time, you Google Anthony Joshua this morning, and that's the first thing you see. And this is an Anthony Joshua who Eddie Hearn is trying desperately to make a massive brand over in the United States. It's almost as if Anthony Joshua could wake up this morning and thinks to himself, I need to do a little bit more of that if I'm going to make this potential Wilder fight one day the super fight that it possibly can be.
You're saying a little bit more of it, yeah?
Yeah.
I completely agree. The big stars in America in boxing have always had a villainous type role. The more Anthony Joshua does that in America, the more people are going to be interested in a Wilder fight. Imagine those two motor-mouthing at each other for 3 months in the build-up to a big rematch in America, perhaps after they fought at Wembley next April, which is booked, of course, hopefully for that fight to take place. Don't, by the way, count on it happening, because these things have a horrible habit of stretching out in boxing. And it might be a rematch with Parker or a rematch with Dillian White next April. You never know. But I agree, it caused some waves in America. It caused the right kind of waves. And you know, apart from the words itself and youngsters watching the stream on Facebook and that kind of thing, I liked the way that Joshua said, listen, I'm standing here with 4 belts. Who are you chirping in the background? Who do you think you are? I mean, listen, I love Big Baby Jarrell Miller. I'm friends with him. He's a great character. But I thought Joshua put his flag in New York and said, listen, I'm the champion. I'm carrying 4 belts in my arms, a bit like me with these dimples showing, Jay. I've been in the gym, yeah? We can go 3 rounds if you want. I've only got 75 seconds in me, so if you can avoid me for 75 seconds, I'll have to call a cab, or maybe even an ambulance at the end of it. But no, the point is, I agree. He laid his mark down, so listen, I'm here, I'm the champion, don't you chirp away over there. This is my moment now. And I think it might have been caused, you know, by the fact that Big Baby Jarrell Miller turned up late for the photo call and the press conference and forced his way in Eddie Hearn. And Joshua, for the first photo shoot, was right on the outside. And you could tell in his face and body language he wasn't happy about it. But I think it was great for the publicity, as you say. We need these kind of things happening. I think an all-out brawl yesterday on the day DAZN launched their kind of their publicity for the first events in Bellator and with Matchroom, and of course they've got the World Boxing Super Series. Would have been a bit of a disaster for them. It would have caused a lot of hits and a lot of controversy. But I think it went as far as it needed to go on the day. But I tell you, this OTT streaming service, once we start streaming, me and Jer, in a trilogy fight from your studio, we'll be doing big numbers. It's all about digital. It's all about streaming. I'm not getting my head shaved for it. I think you will, Jer, when I beat you into a hole. And and we do it for charity.
Yeah, $9.99.
Mixed martial arts.
Yeah, I don't know about that. The 75 seconds, I like my odds of being able to run for at least 60. That's about as far as I could get. Before we let you go, and you've been really good with your time, what was the story with Triple G? On a scale of how annoyed he is about what's gone on with Canelo, where is he at the moment? Has he made some peace with how they have arrived at the process of the rematch?
I think he's annoyed about. Well, he's clearly annoyed about the 2 positive tests for clenbuterol in out of competition testing. We're on drugs again, aren't we? You know, the 2 out of competition drugs tests that Canelo tested positive for in Mexico when he was training. There has been a lot of cases of tainted meat there because they do inject animals with steroids over there, so it is possible. But you know, there's a lot of people that don't go with that. So there's Triple G being annoyed about that, but more annoyed about the fact that Canelo wasn't able to face him on May the 5th, and that he had to have that fight in between. Listen, he didn't have any issues there, but now he's had to wait till September for the second fight. Also annoyed by the fact that Canelo has not agreed to do any press conferences till the one press conference in the week of the fight itself on September the 15th I think they're coming to cart me away here, but on September the 15th. But the thing is, you know, that's mostly what I talked to him about, how immature he felt Canelo was for not coming out and standing up in a media tour. You imagine the kind of questions that Canelo would have had to face from the media and from the fans. So Canelo's kind of, he's long grasped his issue. He said, no, I'm just turning up for fight week in September. Golovkin really wants to prove something this time around. I don't think there's anyone out there that thinks that Canelo won that first fight. He was very lucky to have got a split draw on the judges' cards. We all feel Golovkin clearly won that 8 rounds to 4 or 7 rounds to 5. He's a year older. Canelo's a year older, which suits Canelo. And sadly, in all of this, we've forgotten what a brilliant elite fight it was last September. I was there, and I remember having adrenaline watching it. It was so thrilling while I was writing live. But Golovkin is an angry man, training very hard, and I think we can expect a real barn burner second time around.
Vladimir Putin obviously been in the news a good bit this week in the fight game, primarily because he invited Conor McGregor to the World Cup final. Khabib also happened to be in the stadium. Is this just the greatest prolonged build-up to a UFC fight that we've ever seen? Are they actually going to fight this year or early next year? Or is McGregor done? Has he actually reached that point of his life where he's so rich he doesn't need to get punched in the head and kicked in the belly anymore?
You just prefaced the first punch I'm going to land on you. Could we do the undercard in the Luzhniki Stadium? Me and you, the charity fight, before 110,000 people watch the Notorious against Khabib. No, look, I mean, wouldn't it be the most? I've got to stop this. I've had too much coffee this morning, you know. Two things. The fact that Vladimir Putin invited them both to be in at the final in that stadium, I think, is a potential precursor to an event happening there. Wouldn't it be amazing if they both fought there, and they fought each other there in an open air stadium? You know, in the you know, maybe next year. I don't know if it can happen this year, if they can get it on with it being warm enough there and so on. Clearly, there are moves going on in the background. I happened, gents, to be at Bellator's first event in Rome last Saturday, which was amazing in the open air at the Foro Italico. It was actually in the venue where they hold the Italian Open tennis. It was amazing, and they had kickboxing, and then the cage descended from the sky and landed on the. It was just amazing to the sound of "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," Richard Strauss's great kind of musical tome. I won't bore you, I'm getting too cultured here. But the thing is, it was a great night. But John Kavanagh was there with Will Fleury. And John was saying to me, it might look like Conor's all into bling and showing his cars and getting his cars deported and having to go to New York for his court case. He's got that, of course, late next week. So once that's happened, we'll know when he's back. But what John said, and this is very significant, and you've seen this in the photographs of Conor and the Instagrams that he puts out, he's in great shape. John Kavanagh said he's in SBG every single day he's in Dublin. He is training very hard. He hasn't given up the ghost. He's got to come back. And look, the way he spends money, that money's going to run out at some point. And the way his father, Tony McGregor's putting fuel into that speedboat all over Ireland all the time, they're going to need some more money. He's going to have another fight. He's got to come back. He's got to fight again. I think we'll see him 3 more fights before he retires. And let's be honest, I know Conor's got his detractors and he's been kind of partying, if you like, in the last year and a half. But, you know, he's had a son and, you know, he's not become any less popular. And he only needs to fight again to get the fight fans back on his side. Don't write him off coming back. This is what John Kavanagh said to me. Fighting Khabib first fight back and using that incredible hand speed, that incredible left hand, and like you say, those slicing kicks to the belly that I'm procuring in my own gym at the moment, Jeff, to beat Khabib in the comeback. Look, I think the whole of the mixed martial arts world, and certainly the UFC, are missing Conor McGregor. And that's why they're getting another drug cheat, Brock Lesnar back to fight for them later in the year, because they need the pay-per-view stars. John Jones is out at the moment. Ronda Rousey's gone. The Diaz brothers aren't fighting at the moment. These are all the big pay-per-view sellers, and the biggest of all of them is Conor. They need him back. He will be back. He's not done.
Gareth, great stuff. Thanks a million. I look forward to the preliminaries and the opening press conference.
Cheers. Great to speak to you.
Take care.
Cheers.
Gareth A Davies. You can read his stuff in the Telegraph. You can follow him on Twitter at Gareth A Davies DT.
I'm trying to think of a kind of a suitable name for it all. The rumbling in Dublin or something. I don't know what it's going to be. We've got to come up with a snappy name. We've got to come up with a graphic.
We can park that one there.
We've got to find a card. And we've got to get Gareth over here for the press conference.
We've got to get purses. We've got to agree purses. That's the first thing.
Well, I'm sure Screwfix can sponsor it.
I mean, you mentioned charity there. I was like, well, if we're going to put our lives on the line here. A portion of all earnings will also be given to 2%.
For all the damage that Gareth A will do to you, at least he'll do some good for a worthy cause.
Yeah, it's fair enough.